Advocate Credit Union Broadcast Center. I'm GoLocal News editor Kate Nagel. Would like to welcome my first guest, as we usually do, check in down at the University of Virginia with Professor of Political Science Jennifer Lawless. Thanks for joining us.
Of course.
Plenty going on up here, that's for sure, with the election just a week away now, but clearly national politics, Jennifer, dominating the national stage. Let's talk about what's happened in the last 24 hours with President Donald Trump's talk about looking at an executive order to address the 14th Amendment about birthright citizenship by birth.
Right. This is the latest in Donald Trump's anti-immigration rhetoric, and it actually happened somewhat unexpectedly, I think, during an interview with Axios, where it seemed like the people interviewing him were also somewhat struck by the fact that he had been considering using an executive order to end birthright citizenship. And the background here, of course, is that the 14th Amendment says that anybody born on U.S. soil is automatically a citizen, regardless of whether their parents are. And Trump thinks and said during this Axios interview that it makes absolutely no sense, and why, just because you happen to be born here, should you get citizenship and all of the rights associated with that for 85 or 90 or 100 years. The question, of course, is, can he find even one constitutional scholar who believes that you can undo an amendment with an executive order? Trump seems to think so, but I think pretty much every lawyer out there believes no.
Do you think, Jennifer, that this will be sort of a one-off, that he made the comments to Axios, as you said, but because, will someone pull him aside and say there's likely no teeth to this? Do you think this is the end of it? Or do you think we'll continue to see it have some legs just by lieu of the fact that he brought it up?
Well, I think that in some ways Republican strategists really like this idea heading into the midterm elections, because we know that Trump's Republican base is really, really excited about ending all types of immigration, whether it be legal or whether it be keeping undocumented workers from being able to stay in the country. So this is a way to fire up that base. Republican elected officials, including Paul Ryan, have begun to distance themselves from this kind of rhetoric because it's certainly not going to be helpful for people in the middle. But the timing of it is not a mistake. It's very, very deliberate. In the next 7 days, the Republicans have to ensure that they have voter turnout that looks comparable to that of the Democrats. And immigration seems to be a way to drive up enthusiasm.
Well, we've certainly seen the president paying attention to and keeping an eye on now multiple caravans in Mexico making their way towards the U.S. border. But let's talk a little bit about the timing of this comment on the 14th Amendment. He's had a difficult weekend since the tragedy in Pittsburgh.
Right. There's no question that the timing is geared not only to coincide with the last 7 days of the midterm election campaigns, but also to divert attention from what was yet again an exhibition of horrible sympathy or empathy or the lack thereof. After the terrible murders in Pittsburgh, the administration, and Donald Trump in particular, seemed to offer, at least initially, the kind of solace that most presidents would offer, and then very, very quickly pivoted and diverted any sort of blame and suggested that Donald Trump's rhetoric has nothing to do with this. And it was just not satisfactory for the people in Pittsburgh or to other elected officials across the country or to most Americans who were watching this coverage and were just devastated.
Now, it came on the heels of this news cycle that we see, the violence and the political rhetoric, obviously the pipe bomber being apprehended and being being pro-Trump. I mean, we did see in Pittsburgh that the perpetrator had anti-Trump tweets and social media himself. But one of the things that happened after the incident, Jennifer, was Kellyanne Conway's response, if you remember, calling it just anti-religious and not going as far to say it was anti-Semitic. They're charging it as a hate crime at the federal level. And we saw Sarah Huckabee Sanders try to sort of backtrack on that. What was your reaction when you saw Kellyanne Conway's response calling it simply anti-religiously motivated?
Well, beyond the fact that it was completely ridiculous as a statement, my general response was this is a way for the administration to try and separate Donald Trump's statements about being a nationalist just a week ago to overt acts of anti-Semitism. Because despite the fact that a lot of people claim that Republicans who were supporting Trump claim that Trump's type of nationalism is really just a sense of patriotism, the average person out there understood that it invoked Nazi memories, and it suggested a type of ethos and ideology consistent with Nazism. And so, in order for the administration to say that, no, that's not the case, they have to make it clear that what happened at the synagogue was not at all motivated by anti-Semitism. It's very difficult for them to do that, given that allegedly the shooter said when he was being treated in the hospital, we have to get rid of all the Jews. That's not anti-religious, that's anti-Semitic.
And Sarah Huckabee Sanders' damage control following Kellyanne Conway's comments, pointing to the Judaism in the Trump family with his children and grandchildren.
I mean, that's terrific. That's great that Donald Trump's daughter converted to Judaism and that his grandchildren are Jewish. And it also in no way shaped the comments that he made in Charlottesville a year and a half ago. It in no way shaped his initial reaction to what happened in Pittsburgh. And it in no way increases his overall sense of empathy. And so it's a smart tactical maneuver to suggest that the president's not anti-Semitic. And maybe he personally is not anti-Semitic. But there's a difference between being willing to fight anti-Semitism and being willing to accept it. And this president, even if he's not anti-Semitic, has demonstrated an unwillingness to hold people accountable when they engage in this kind of behavior.
And let's talk about the president's visit to Pittsburgh. At least one of the victims' families refused to meet with the president. And let's talk about the rest of the Republican leadership distancing themselves from Trump.
Right. I've got to say that this, to me, is one of the most remarkable moments we've seen in this administration. It's almost unheard of to think that a president would offer to go and convey his sympathy after a national tragedy. And the mayor of Pittsburgh over the weekend on the Sunday morning shows replying to that offer by saying, I don't know, we have to talk to the families. If Barack Obama or if George W. Bush or if Bill Clinton or if Ronald Reagan or George H.W. Bush had said that they were planning on mourning with families amid or in the aftermath of a terrible tragedy, that would have been expected. Now we've reached a point in time where at least one of the families does not want the president there, likely because they associate him with the violence. The Republican leaders have basically said that they already had really full schedules, but I think part of it is that they don't want to be on tape standing next to him when he might say something that can be construed as anti-Semitic or lacking in empathy or anything else. It's one thing not to hold him accountable by denouncing the kinds of things he says. It's another thing to be standing next to him while he says it. And there, a lot of the Republican leaders seem to have drawn the line.
Now, speaking of lines, clearly walking a fine, if not a finite one, as you mentioned, 7 days now to the election, and the number of rallies that the president himself is involved in goes along with the territory of it being election season. But we've seen some pushback, and it was by Pharrell in the use of a song, Happy, at one of the rallies. So on one hand, you have a president trying to energize his base, and on the other hand, you had the greatest incident of anti-Semitism in this country. I mean, what do you do?
You don't play the song Happy at the end of the rally, right? So, I mean, there are ways to continue on the campaign trail even amid national tragedies. Most candidates opt not to do it. Most candidates take a break. And there seems to generally be this norm that although we don't suspend all types of political campaign activity, for example, candidates might not take down ads that they've already paid for, they might not stop fundraising or small gatherings. Usually these very big scale rallies wind up coming to an end, at least for a short period of time. If that's not going to happen, then I think it's incumbent upon Democrats and Republicans, when they're engaged in this kind of behavior, to at least acknowledge the tragedy that has ensued, not in terms of having to stand out in the rain and answer questions about it, and as a result, it messed up Donald Trump's hair. That was basically the reference to the tragedy. But also to be sure that you're not tone deaf about the manner in which you're conducting this rally. And, by using that song, I think the administration just demonstrated, and the Trump campaign just demonstrated, a disconnect from the American people. Pharrell Williams seems to think the same, and not only was he appalled that they played the song, but he's now issued, through his lawyers, a statement saying that he does not want any of his music played at any Trump event ever.
It is interesting. We oftentimes do see musicians make those statements as it pertains to a political elected official or candidate, but in this instance, within the national tenor of what the country is going through right now. So, Jennifer, a week to go until Tuesday. As we always say, politics can change on a dime, a 24-hour news cycle. But what are we keeping an eye on the next 7 days?
Well, last week we talked about the fact that there might be an October surprise. I think over the course of the last week, we've seen lots of elements of that surprise, from the bombs to what happened in Pittsburgh. And so my bet is that we're not going to see much more in the way of shock in the next 7 days. Of course, who knows? But what that really means then is that it's a turnout game. And given these circumstances, are the Republicans now more energized than they might have been? Because Donald Trump now is able to rally around anti-media messaging. He's able to rally around immigration, and that might be what the Republicans need in some of these districts. So we'll see. Early voting in Texas, though, for example, suggests the opposite. Among young people, early voting was way up. And so if it turns out that young people are as energized as a lot of Democrats had hoped, that might be enough to offset any sort of late game Republican enthusiasm. We know that Democratic women, we know that Democratic middle-aged people have been pretty excited and are likely to turn out. It was the young people who were the wild card. So if Texas is any indication, it could bode well for the Democrats on Tuesday night.
Well, we're going to continue to keep a close eye on national and local politics moving up till Tuesday. Jennifer Lawless, as always, appreciate your taking the time to Skype in down from the University of Virginia.
Of course.
Okay, thanks. Don't go anywhere. We're going to be right back here with our next guest in the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Navigate Credit Union Broadcast Center. I'm GoLocal News editor Kate Nagel. Thanks for tuning in for the Tuesday afternoon show. I'd like to welcome my next guest in, investment advisor John Kosmarski. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Kate.
With Efficient Capital Strategies. I'm glad you're able to come in here because every so often we like to get a temperature gauge of the markets, and it's been a little volatile as of late.
Certainly. October has been a unusual month for equities. It's been as of yesterday, markets were down around 9%. We had a pretty good rally today.
Okay.
So we're down around 7.7% month to date. So that's kind of an unusual month for stocks. So investors should be, a little fearful of what's going on, but we've had months like this before.
Okay, so don't get too skittish right away. But, we've seen such a run with the market. And you said, folks really, when taking into account factors, it's not just here in the country, it's really on the international stage.
Absolutely, absolutely. And what has kind of occurred in the last 40 days has just been a catch-up from what's been happening overseas.
Okay.
Overseas markets, emerging markets, the Chinese stock market have been under extreme pressure for a long time. And the U.S. has just kind of been an aberration, has been, kind of detached from it, and what's happened overseas has kind of trickled down to our shores over the last 40 days.
Did you anticipate this? I mean, as you talk about this past month, but did folks see this downturn coming, or did it take folks by surprise?
I would say it should take most folks by surprise. On the week of September 17th, the S&P 500 and the Dow made an all-time record closing high. We made a move around 10%, depending on the index, roughly from that level. It's certainly nothing abnormal for the market, but the real question is for investors is what is next. Not to have a big mystery here, but that's really what's going on. Do we recover? Does the global economy recover from what's going on, and or do we continue? It's a good question.
Well, obviously, a lot of uncertainty, especially here in the country leading up to the election. Now, we have talked with some folks who thought maybe it was built into the market, but this past month, we did see some volatility. Let's talk past the election, but let's just, I don't want to bring politics into it too much, but a lot of folks, especially supporters of this current administration, are saying it's President Donald Trump responsible for the success of the market. Let's talk about the strength of the U.S. dollar.
Yes, as you can see, Donald Trump has not been shy about
Donald
Market. Yes, he has not been shy about discussing the stock market with voters. So, it's really a global event, and he is connected into what's happening globally. I think investment analysts are perturbed what was occurring with our relationship with China and some of our other trade partners. That has definitely not helped the situation what's going on, and I believe that there's a lot of uncertainty going into 2019, and I think that's why the markets have repriced. And I think that's really what's going on in the markets, is that they're looking past what's happened this year and focusing on next year.
And let's talk about, again, where things are at with the economy and what markets do and don't take into account. And one of the things that is talked about constantly is the debt level of this country. And obviously that's something on the fiscal side of things. So how does the market respond to that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sorry for, I should have mentioned the U.S. dollar. The U.S. dollar has been rallying against other major currencies for the greater part of 6 months and making highs for the year. A lot of emerging market economies borrowed in dollars. So you're seeing emerging market economies down 20% plus this year. And it's really kind of dragged the U.S. down with it.
Okay.
Debt levels in the United States, it's very, we're at a budget deficit of about $1 trillion a year. We're at the point, I'm not really equipped to speak on that issue, but we're at a point where it's probably getting to be on the higher side of unsustainable.
Okay. And let's talk about those leadership stocks and their performances, the Facebooks, the Amazons, and where those are. We obviously saw what occurred with Facebook in the last several months, but even all of them, you're saying, are looking, they're all trending in the same direction.
Yeah, yes, they've been, it's been a wild ride in the NASDAQ 100, which is predominantly dominated by those stocks and the common acronym FANG, which is Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Netflix, Google. The mighty have fallen. They have been provided substantial leadership to the U.S. stock market, and a lot of these stocks are down 10, 20% from their highs, entering bear market territory. It certainly doesn't help when the leaders of this multi-year rally have sold off, and pretty substantially and pretty violently too. So investors should make their own decisions about those stocks.
Moving forward, and we talked about that, what each investor should consider based on their own needs, and that's really what it is, as you talked about, in terms of probably any investment advisor talking with their clients as they're in a little shock and awe right now as to what's taking place. But again, keeping that end game in mind, whether it's more immediate or more long term.
Yes, absolutely. And investors are going to get their statements in sometime next week, and it could be a little shocking. what's happened from the last time they received a statement. I would advise investors just to take a deep breath, stay calm. It's very psychologically intimidating when these things happen, and just kind of review what your long-term goals are. You know, it this the market could continue to go lower, but I'm pretty confident that a year or two from now, the U.S. economy will still be intact and growth will be underway. Here's the big caveat: it could get a little dicier before that happens.
Okay.
So investors should be ready to endure, a little more volatility than usual. Investors have been spoiled over the last 10 years. Returns have been very high. Volatility has been very low. So, we're almost in the same spot we were last year with high volatility.
Okay.
So maybe we're entering a period of low returns and high volatility. Maybe we're not. Maybe last year was just abnormal, and we resume the current trend. But investors should be really, be very cognizant of what the risk is, but also be very cognizant of what they're investing for.
Okay.
Whether it be their retirement, their kids, their child's education, or just to live, or to grow their assets. So they should be very very aware of what the goal is, and obviously, and very acute that it could get very, it could get very shocking over the next 12 months.
You said that it could get a little more pain, but you're optimistic of a potential for a bounce back and not a sustained. We're not talking the big R.
Yes, and I think actually the next 12 months will be felt more by Wall Street than by Main Street.
Okay.
I believe there's a repricing of financial assets going on based on what's happening globally, and knock on wood, hopefully the U.S. economy will continue to just print GDP numbers over 2%. I'm pretty confident that we will, but financial assets have had a long run, as you have said, are trading at very high valuations, and not very high valuations, but higher than normal valuations. And investors should be aware of what the possible risk could be in the short term, but also focused on the long term, because the real growth for their accounts and for their is the long term.
Focus on that long game.
Yep.
Again, as we're having a very what's the correct word I'm looking for here right now with the market?
I think right now this would be called a correction because we are actually 10% off highs.
Okay.
20% off highs. It will enter what's known as a bear market, quote unquote, technical bear market.
Yep.
But we've had a long run in stocks, and I'm very confident about the future of the U.S. economy. Even if we do hit a rough patch over the next 12 months, I think investors will be quite delighted by the end of the decade.
Okay, keeping an eye short-term and long-term on markets. John Kazmarski with Efficient Capital Strategies. Thank you so much for coming in
Thanks,
today.
Kate.
I appreciate
Thanks for having
it.
me.
Don't go anywhere. We're going to be right back with our next guest here in the Navigate Credit Union Broadcast Center. Hi everyone, welcome back to the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. I'm GoLocal News Editor Kate Nagel. I'd like to welcome my next guest in, James Montero. Thank you for coming back today.
Thank you for having me, Kate.
As there's a big event taking place this weekend on Camp Street with the Billy Taylor House.
Yes. Well, it's actually Hometown Polk is having their grand opening. We finished construction on the building finally, and we got a really good tenant. Couldn't be more blessed to have them. Hometown Polk. So this is a grand opening celebration not only for Hometown Polk but also for Billy Taylor House and for the whole community to have this in this neighborhood. It's been a long time coming.
You posted the pictures. The inside just looks spectacular.
Yes.
Unbelievable. So talk with us about the vision when you're talking about Billy Taylor House and getting that tenant in there, going through that process. We've had Hometown here in the studio before. I mean, really focusing on the food, and I'll tell you, the food looks phenomenal. Laura Afonso has had them in the studio. But let's talk about what this means to the community in general, to have, again, them being the anchor tenant, have it rehabbed, refurnished, and the way that it just, again, looks amazing.
A while back, I had went to a program called United Teen Equality Center, and this is a program that they had for-profit businesses that they funneled back into a nonprofit structure, and they hired youth from the community to work in this nonprofit. So it was kind of encompassing all facets of the community. So the goal of Billy Taylor House was to create a nonprofit organization that hired kids from the community to give them employment and training and soft skills in a business that would actually generate revenue for the organization, opposed to always having to seek out outside sources of grants. So that was the goal for it. And again, we couldn't be more blessed to have Hometown Polk because they're a good addition to the community.
And speaking of the addition, the location on Camp Street, not a lot of commercial in that particular block area. There's there's the community center, and then there's now this Billy Taylor House, and having this restaurant opportunity. I mean, what does it mean for the neighborhood to have this injection of energy, commerce, you know, a place for folks to go? You know, it's more than just the business.
It's huge. I came home from Maryland in 2009, and the only thing in the Mount Hope community were 2 corner stores that were riddled with a lot of bad publicity, bad press. And this doesn't make up a community, Kate. There's no place for people to come. If I wanted to get a decent cup of coffee, I had to leave my neighborhood and go to some other neighborhood to get a decent cup of coffee. So this having Hometown Polk here allows for neighbors in the community to actually come out, have some coffee or some really good food, and begin to engage with one another and get to know each other, opposed to always being fragmented and into their own silos within the community.
And you are welcoming the community in on Saturday. Talk about the nuts and bolts. What are the hours going to be? What can folks expect?
Well, they just posted the hours, so it's 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Becca and Tiff, really good people. I mean that wholeheartedly from heart. Yeah, it's going to be awesome.
It's going to be awesome. We're going to put the information at both for the hours moving forward, and of course the big event taking place on Saturday, where the
grand
community
open is from 11 to 6. So sorry.
Oh no worries. Well, that's if you want to come check it out. It'll be a special grand opening. And then, you know, Hometown Polk aside, what's next for the Billy Taylor House?
Oof, we're going to go upstairs, finish construction upstairs. We're going to put some affordable rooms there because, I mean, the neighborhood rents have gone up dramatically in the neighborhood. Office space, and we will be bringing back our summer jobs program this year, thank God, yay! Because we have a funding source now. We don't have to continue to go for outside sources of funding. And then the lot down the street, we hope to eventually landscape the lot down the street and maybe put like an ice cream shack.
Oh, a little ice cream. Heard it here first. Right. Get your dinner, go get your ice cream.
Absolutely.
And additional programs moving forward with the Billy Taylor House. Now, hate to put you on the spot, but you were just recognized in a video from a national organization for your work in the community.
Yeah, Unlock Futures, Free America Campaign, Bank of America, and New Profit. John Legend is actually spearheading this project along with New Profit, and they helping us to help individuals who are currently and formerly incarcerated continue education that they started behind prison walls.
Well, I appreciate you wear many hats.
Yeah.
You wear many hats, but this is the hat I wanted you to come in to let folks know. And the exact address on Camp Street of Billy Taylor House?
185 Camp Street, grand opening, hometown poke, Beck and Tiff. Come meet them. Food is, you will love it. I know I'm going to lose weight. I know I'm going to lose it, and it's needed. So, from 3 to 6 p.m. This Saturday coming up.
This Saturday, come enjoy, again, some new hometown offerings on Camp Street. Again, bringing a new business injection into the community. Couldn't have been possible without James Montero and Billy Taylor House. So thank you so much. I appreciate it. And you are my last guest. So we are wrapping up here in the Navigate Credit Union Broadcast Center. I want to thank Jennifer Lawless down at the University of Virginia, John Kozmarski, talking markets from Efficient Capital Strategies, and of course, James Montero. And we'll see you back here tomorrow on Wednesday. Laura Afonso will be up with food, and I'll of course be here with news and politics. Thanks for watching. Continue to read GoLocalProb.com and catch us on Facebook throughout the evening. And we look forward to seeing you here tomorrow in the Navigate Credit Union Broadcast Center. I'm GoLocal News Editor Kate Nagel.
God bless. Thank you.
Thank you.